All right, well, let's kick off this first topic because one's kind of interesting to me. Yeah, we're going to talk about ransomware. I don't know if you know this or not, but it's kind of a big deal. Just listen to any of your favorite podcasts, especially if they revolve around the news. Someone's getting hit with ransomware. I got a panicked text message from my kid's school last week saying, if you own one of the laptops that is being used in the school, you need to shut it down right now because there's something going on at the school. So of course we did. It was at home, but we still shut it off anyway because we do what we're told. And then there's this slow progression of, nobody can get to any internal systems. We don't really know what's going on. And we have to go back to the archaic days of using pencils and paper to do schoolwork. And then it turns out, because I'm, being an InfoSec person, I'm like, ooh, what'd they get? That's something cool. Maybe it's something new. We found out that one, none of the iOS devices issued by the district were affected, naturally. Two, none of the Macs issued by the district were affected, which means basically every school student's laptop was not affected because they all standardized on Macs. So it was really the district's Windows machines that were being affected. They're still trying to figure out what it is. They won't tell me. I've asked. But it kind of speaks to a point of, before it was like, Colonial Pipeline getting hit by this. Or look, they used Kaseya to deploy it to how many systems? And they're asking for these huge ransoms. And now it's like, yeah, let's just shut down a school. Or let's shut down a hospital. Or, let's see how much damage we can really cause. And it kind of speaks to a point where we brought up in a previous presentation. In the old days, this was script kiddies. I mean, how many of you watched the seminal 1995 work Hackers with Johnny Lee Miller and Angelina
Jolie? The best movie of all time.
Right, Hack the Gibson. But remember, back then it was about cred, man. It was like, what have you done? I don't know your handle. I haven't seen what you've done. You got to prove yourself to me. And now it's a bunch of people who are like, yeah, I don't want to get caught. I just want to get paid. If you listen to Darknet Diaries, the podcast, Jack Resider did an excellent episode about Our Evil a few weeks ago, where he talked about the fact that these guys were like making money hand over fist, basically doing ransomware as a service, and then they got caught. And then they scattered to the wind, but they were a group that had scattered to the wind before that. And then the group after that will be probably composed of some of these folks as well. What the hell happened? Like, I'm legitimately curious about this because, like, not only did ransomware change the way that we do security, it changed the products that we used. Anybody remember antivirus? It ain't antivirus anymore. It's EDR. It's now XDR. We had to change the way that we do things because it's not, the I love you bug or the slammer worm anymore. It's like, oh, great, all of the files on my machine are encrypted, and now I have to get into this, encrypted Telegram channel to negotiate with, let's call them what they are, cyber terrorists. So, I mean, Jasper, obviously you deal with this crap on a regular basis. I mean, what are you seeing?
Oh, well, the funny thing, first of all, is that ever since the war broke out in Ukraine, we see less of it because apparently the Russian and Ukrainian organized crime groups doing this have other things to do right now than to hit at least Germany in the meantime. But yeah, what we see is that more and more franchise gangs are out there, and that they do the encryption no matter how small or how little money somebody has. The smallest customer I had was a one-person tax person doing tax work for her clients, and her PC got encrypted because she wanted to have a VPN to work from home on that PC. And the IT guy that she hired couldn't figure out how to build a VPN, so they just forwarded RDP to the internet, and it took about 2 days, I think, until somebody guessed her password correctly, and her PC got encrypted. So that was 3,000 euros, and then she could continue to work. They don't care how small anyone is. They hit everything. It's just a matter of when, basically.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt when my kid's school got hit. It was, you're not just some mom and pop school district with like 50 students. Like you're one of the biggest ones in the state. It's only a matter of time before you get popped. And the question at this point is really how fast can you contain that problem? So, I mean, what are you guys seeing?
I mean, you brought up EDR earlier, and that is definitely one of the main tools that are out there right now, because the way EDR works is it sits on all the endpoint devices and it looks for those kind of executions. Again, it's not looking for a signature like we're used to in the old antivirus days. It's looking for behavior as much as it is any sort of signature. And you mentioned ransomware as a service, and of course that means that a lot of them look a lot the same. So those work on the individual devices, but then they also can coordinate across other devices to then be able to find out that, hey, we're seeing it across 3 different machines all of a sudden, and maybe it's not a problem on one, but if we're seeing it across a third of the machines in our environment, maybe that's an indication of something. So that intelligence needs to be local so that it can react as quickly as possible. We saw this with the Fortinet presentation, that the sooner you find it, the better, because you don't want that dwell time to go up. So taking that intelligence up another level and trying to figure it out across the organization is important too.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem. I mean, I did some work with Commvault a couple of weeks ago at Commvault Connections, and they were talking about the fact that what they're doing now, and Dell Technologies is doing this as well, is they're looking for signatures of certain things in their network, not necessarily like, oh, this is CLES. It's, oh, hey, a non-insubstantial amount of data just suddenly is no longer able to be compressed. So the available storage area went down, even though we're not writing data to it. It's because the data is being encrypted by a data locker. And so they're able to detect it, stop it, and then give you the option to recover said data, which, okay, that's great. But what happens when you can't afford that massive machine learning heuristic SAN system with all these extra bells and whistles that get turned on with the licenses?
Well, just ask the owners of a lot of SMB NASs like QNAP. Mm-hmm. They get locked is what happens. I mean, yeah, I've got a QNAP NAS that I don't let anywhere near the internet. But the reality is that what a lot of these people are doing is they're not taking backups, and they get locked, and some of them try paying the Bitcoin and seeing if they can get their data back, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's really, I think the problem the attack surface, for lack of a better term, is spread out now, where there's a lot of these, people who don't have the resources at a much smaller level, and they're the ones who are really getting hammered by this, because it's like, okay, well, if my business loses a bunch of data, I mean, I'll be kind of sad, but if I lose all of my personal data, all my, however many years of pictures and all that kind of stuff, that really sucks.
Let's be fair. Back in the old days, whenever I worked for Gateway Computers, that was the one thing that I hated to do more than anything else, is when somebody got, CLES or NIMDA on their machine, and they're like, oh yeah, things are running slow. And we would go into MS-config and find out what was going on. And you're like, yeah, you called warranty support. I can't save anything. I can wipe your drive and we can restart from scratch. Or you can call tutorial support and pay $2 a minute, and they can try to save all your pictures and back them up somewhere. And that was back in 2003. It's not like you could just back things up to a USB drive. It was like, oh, you're going to be burning things to how many CDs for a while?
Well, I think that's one of the nice things. I've run into this, with a family member. Their small business actually, got ransomware, but fortunately, I had worked with them, and they were using everything in Dropbox. And so it was an email and boom, roll it back. Yeah. And, able to recover. So I think certainly, in some regards, things like Dropbox and OneDrive, have really made, I think, the consumer or the end user aspect of this, we have options now that we didn't used to. And I think that is really nice, because it's very low overhead. It's easy to consume. But obviously for the enterprise itself, there's still a big problem, when it comes to systems that outside of the end user workstation.
Well, the biggest problem that we see is that the really good attackers, like the professional ones, those who really have like a 9-to-5 kind of job doing this, they go after all your protections first before they encrypt.
Yeah.
So even EDR will not help you, because they just shut it down before they do anything. And very often also, like as Tom mentioned, having a high uncompressible amount of data, what they do when they encrypt is they don't encrypt everything. They just encrypt stripes on the large chunks of data. So that's basically 90% is still readable data, but you can't use it anymore because your database file now has stripes of encrypted data scattered all over the file. That's why it's also so fast. We have seen like 150 terabytes of data being encrypted in 3 hours. That's how they do it. And they will always go after your backups first.
Yeah, I thought it was funny because like when we were talking to Dell Technologies in a Tech Field Day showcase recently, that's what they said. We're not going to encrypt your whole database. We're just going to encrypt the data table. Like, oh, you wanted to be able to look all that stuff up? Good luck, because now it's gone. But yeah, like that's one of the things that this is not kids. This is not somebody on a weekend Code Red Mountain Dew bender trying to, prove that they're good at what they do. This is a professional. This is their job. They log into work every day and their job is to figure out how to break your machine efficiently, quickly, and get you to pay. And so I think that that's kind of amped things up quite a bit.
Well, I think, speaking of pay, I do wonder if, the rise of crypto really is what has enabled this. It does. I know that it's not, all of it. It used to be gift cards, primarily money order.
Yeah.
But the dollar amounts were so much smaller. Now the opportunities to get, hit a target for millions of dollars, versus a couple hundred, is very different.
Even with the money portion, somebody mentioned earlier that the cost to turn on all the things to detect it is a lot, right? So your average home user is not going to buy that. The small medium businesses aren't going to buy that. It's, oh, you got popped. It's cheaper to pay, the ransom, spend $10,000-$20,000, maybe get it back or start over than it is to just go buy a couple $1 million of licenses.
So here's a thought, because Carl brings up an interesting point. The old days, if I got popped, I had to pay, right? Like I can remember seeing certain things, like they would literally pop up with a credit card form that you could just type your credit card info in and they charge you like $500, right? But they don't want that now. They want $3,000 in Bitcoin. Let's be fair, Bitcoin is the thing du jour, as we've seen recently. They're not getting paid. They're getting an investment. Because the idea is that if I can pop everybody, if I can get 100 people to give me 1 Bitcoin each, or 1/10 of a Bitcoin each, then I have 10 or 100 Bitcoin. And tomorrow, the value of that asset has appreciated. Well, assuming that nobody else crashes today, the rate we're going. But that's the thing, is now it's not just doing this for grins. And this isn't, I listened into the latest episode of Darknet Diaries from Jack Resider. Like, this isn't selling a fake autograph baseball on eBay for $60. This is getting a token that if I hold on to it and can wash it and keep it from getting stolen or repossessed, it could be worth 10x shortly. It's a hell of a motivator to get up and go to work every day. It's like working for gold. It's like, yeah, well, it sucks to have to buy things with it, but boy, at the rate we're going to make a fortune. Also untraceable, mostly.
I think what makes it difficult is how do you actually plan or test for this? Like in certain scenarios for like DR, right? You can plan and you can go through the progression, but how do you plan for, or, like you always have those fire drills. All right, we're doing this. We're going to plan for this. But what do? How do you go through the whole methodology and say, simulate that somebody's going to encrypt all my stuff? And now how do I get it back? Now I do a plan to get it back. Do I pretend that I lost all this stuff and now I can retrieve it? But then what if I don't have my backups? What if I don't? These small companies don't have the ability to do that on a daily or weekly basis. And enterprises will just pay for like Convol or have all those other services available to them that they're like, yeah, we'll just get it when it's time.
Well, and that kind of brings up a point. Is ransomware just to be viewed as another form of disaster, an unnatural disaster that could hit you? If my DR plan is solid, what's the difference between, is there a difference between a ransomware attack or an earthquake or a flood or, flying monkeys or whatever?
I pose to customers that yes, there is a difference, but they all need to be part of your business continuity DR plan. And there's no reason that you should have separate plans for them, but there may be different paths within the same plan as to what to do. Because, in a natural disaster, sometimes you have to worry about the locality of it. And in ransomware, you may just need to move to the next building over would be fine. So the way you deal with it definitely changes, but it is absolutely should be part of a BCDR plan these days.
Well, to something that Jasper brought up earlier, to me, one of the differences is that a hurricane will not go try to delete your backups first before it wipes out your data center. So there's a little bit of a malicious aspect to it where it knows how to hurt you, as opposed to, oh, I'm just going to wipe out 10 city blocks. And so it feels like there's a little bit more logic that has to be involved in that kind of thing, so that we know that they don't have access to the admin account on the system, or oh, you pop somebody who has domain admin privileges on their laptop. Oh crap!
But when you build a BCDR plan, you need to ideally create a backup situation that will satisfy as many, if not all, of your recovery plans. And theoretically, any advantage that you put to protect your data from a ransomware situation, the 3211 type rule, or whichever rule you want to use there, that helps to prevent from ransomware deleting those backups or encrypting those backups as well. And we've, as a service provider that hosts backups for customers, we've had ransomware people call trying to get us to delete some of the protected backups that we keep for customers. And we're like, okay, well, what's the password? And they don't know the password. And so we hang up from them and call the customer and say, hey, did you try to do this? And they say no. And we say, okay, you may want to go check your systems.
Yeah, Vasily's evidently in there and he's about to do some bad things.
Yeah. So having the proper controls around that for ransomware improves your situation should the hurricane come, because now you've got additional, and maybe you've got it in additional places, and maybe you've got it in places where you don't want to rely on your own people to do it. You want to rely on a third party to start the resource.
Or you have an immutable vault, which is not something you really would ever think about before. It's like, well, why would I want that data to never be messed with? Oh, wait, I know now.
Yeah.
I wonder also that a lot of the things that Brian just described they cost money, they cost time, right? They cost engineers time, they cost space, it costs space to store backups, stuff like that. But there's a number of places over the past few years since ransomware has skyrocketed in popularity of paying the insurance, right? Being able just to pay for it. But I've seen recently that insurance companies, or at least in the past, they would cover things like this, these cyber incidents, the tree falling on your house, the act of God sort of in the internet. But now insurance companies are enforcing some protections that say, like, you must have EDR installed on all of your systems. You must have a 321 backup policy.
You must have IR.
You have to store one of your backups in one of our approved backup facilities, in order for us to insure you.
So let's talk about that, because it's actually a really interesting point that's come up, is this rise of cyber insurance. I don't need to worry about this. I'll just take out a policy. I'll take out a $10 million policy that says that if my data gets encrypted by, I'll pick whatever your flavor is, that I'll get paid for it. And I can use that money to recover or whatever. And let's be fair, we all know what insurance is here for. It's to make money off the premiums and never pay. And then something funny happened. They had to pay a lot because the insurance policies were not written well enough for them to get out of them. And I know I sound cynical, but probably because I've had to deal with insurance people. Think about the insurance that you have to deal with for, say, we'll use a vehicle and a home. So in a vehicle, you know what they want to know? Who caused the accident, which means who pays. And they're going to do everything they can to figure out how they don't have to pay. Did you run a red light? Did you not stop long enough? Was it the other guy's fault? Whatever they can. I actually had a tree get dropped on my house many, many years ago. Freak accident, right? I had to jump through so many hoops to get the insurance agency to replace my roof, because they're like, well, that tree was growing awful close to your house. I'm like, you insured my house 10 years ago whenever your guy came out and said, oh yeah, that tree will never fall on your house. But now, we're running into these situations where the cyber insurance companies are like, hold on just a minute. You were running without a firewall? Mm-hmm. Well, we're not going to pay. Well, you didn't write that into your coverage policy. You're going to pay. And it's to the point now where I actually heard from Greg Farrell on the Packet Pushers that there are rumors that Lloyd's of London, which is the world's largest secondary insurance provider. So your insurance company buys insurance from Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London pays out to that company when you have to pay out. They're actually looking at not even doing cyber insurance anymore, because it turns out it's costing them a small fortune to actually have to pay out on all these things. So some companies are getting smart and saying, no, you have to have a firewall. You have to have zero trust architecture. You have to use, Equinix as your vaulting site. Some of them are just like, we're not going to pay anymore. So could the collapse of the cyber insurance market cause a lot of movement in the ransomware prevention market?
Well, you also add that what you can do with that money is starting to be cut off at the knees. There's a bill in Australian Parliament right now making it absolutely illegal to pay ransomware.
We got some of those in the U.S. now too.
Yeah, if it's Lazarus Group and you're on the Treasury watch list, you can't pay. Like Garmin had to get special government permission to pay the ransom that they got hit with because it was a mission critical system. Otherwise, you're not allowed to pay at all.
It's a problem we have in Germany now because of the US laws. There's no German bank right now anymore that will help you transfer these amounts of Bitcoins anywhere. And if you ever try to open up an account at a trade thing for Bitcoin, you will notice that you can only trade low amounts of euros, dollars, whatever. But if somebody wants 4.5 million euros from you, you can't even create an account to trade that. So you need a bank to do that for you. And no bank in Germany does that anymore because of the repercussions in the US if they do that kind of thing. So we will have collateral damage here.
And that's something that's come up too, is that most trading platforms will only allow accounts to trade a small amount. So and the people in the chats know that. They're like, you need to call these people and these people will help you effectively launder that Bitcoin. And then you take down something like Tornado Cash, which was a Bitcoin tumbler that allowed them to hide those transactions and spread them all across the blockchain so they could actually get the money back. And like that's becoming a huge problem for them to even get paid. But I have seen where like if you log into the system and you start chatting with whoever's on the other side, some of the first questions they ask are, do you have insurance? Who's your insurer? How likely am I to get paid? Like to quote the old thing, F you pay me. Like that's their model. And the thing is, they almost always unlock your stuff because it's bad customer service when you pay and you don't get your stuff unlocked. You'll leave a bad review on whatever site it is and you'll never see your stuff again.
They unlock most of your data. It's no guarantee though.
Right. But I mean, what are you going to do? Get it back?
And then it goes back to the BCDR side of things and make sure you've got good backups that you can rely on because ultimately that's the only way you can guarantee you get your data back.
But what happens when we'll use the Kaseya hack as a good example. So most people know that in 2021, Kaseya was hacked and they were used to deploy ransomware to a large number of their clients. Something like 1,700 customers got infected all at once. And they called the FBI, US FBI, and the FBI was like, okay, cool. Like they were already on it to the point where they were inside of REvil servers. They had the decryption keys and they were waiting. And as soon as the Bitcoin payment hit, they clawed most of it back. Like they were literally waiting for this to happen. So, there's a lot of people who are like, this is not a problem that you can solve. There are a lot of people who are like, call the FBI. Get them involved.
Tom, I think that's it. I don't think this problem can be solved. I don't know. I don't want to sound negative or be a pessimist, but I kind of feel like ransomware is as prolific as spam email is. Mm-hmm. Like someone figured out years and years ago, I don't know when, but how to effectively send spam email, mass email, and go look in your inbox. Every one of us in this room and watching and listening from now until the day of my death will have spam in their inbox. And I think what we have done is maybe it was a perfect storm that sort of created ransomware, the popularity of it and made it so it's easy to do. Just go on GitHub. You can download tons and hundreds of different scripts that are well-made pieces of software, right? By talented people you can ransomware your own computer if you want as a proof of concept. It's so readily available. I don't think it's going away. I think, the 3-2-1 method, that's not prevention, right? That's simply recovery.
SOP.
So basically, we just need to accept the risk, somehow mitigate the risk a little bit, and even if it's 3-2-1 or whatever cool method someone comes out with in the future, but I don't think ransomware is going away with or without crypto.
So I'll actually make a counterpoint to that. I think that it's actually not going to be that crazy. And the reason why is because spam is a level of magnitude easier to pull off because the amount of resources that I have to invest in a spam system is very minimal. And all I have to do is get 1 or 2 hits and I've made my money back. Look at the amount of effort that it takes to invest in a ransomware campaign. Just listen to all of the stuff that has to happen. You have to be able to get access to the system. You have to figure out if they're going to pay. You have to encrypt things. You have to have somebody standing by on the line. Operators are standing by to process that payment. You have to figure out how to get it. As Jasper brought up, how are you going to get paid $4 million in Bitcoin because nobody can do it? There's such an infrastructure investment in that right now that cannot be automated away that I don't think it's ever going to grow past a certain point. And as Jasper brought up at the beginning of this, when certain geopolitical events are causing the overall amount of ransomware campaigns to plummet because those people are busy doing other things, probably being sent to the front lines, it's causing it's obviously noticeable enough that we're all standing around going, huh, that's weird. It's almost like everyone who was doing that was concentrated in one part of the world. I wonder how we could solve this problem.
The only thing I'll bring up about your infrastructure, you're absolutely right that doing this at scale and at the effectiveness is the infrastructure. But we've heard of this term that has come up in the last few years, which is, ransomware as a service.
Yeah.
I mean, the infrastructure, everything is already in place so much that you can deploy ransomware as a service in a Kubernetes infrastructure on a free Google Cloud account with web servers and beacons and all kinds of stuff ready for you.
Well, you don't even need to do it. You just hire the people and you pay them. You get 40% of whatever the ransom is, and they get to keep 60%, but they're doing the legwork.
My point is, I think it's at this point, I mean, I haven't ran a ransomware campaign myself, but I assume it can be as simple as a basic spam email campaign at this point in today's age.
What were you going to say?
Yeah, I guess, looking at how do we get there, and again, completely theoretical, right? I mean, it's either one, we find a way to de-incentivize, the attackers, or we find a way to reduce the value of data to zero or to near zero. And, in reducing, and I kind of, again, going back to, things like, OneDrive or Box, once my data recovery is seconds, okay, yeah, you got me.
Yep.
I'm back, 5 minutes later, then okay, I don't care anymore. Now it's a spam annoyance.
No, you don't, unfortunately.
I know that I know that we're not there, and I know it's going to take, especially.
No. Even if you do this, what they do now is the double extortion thing.
Or triple
So
extortion.
they always exfil a ton of data that is really important to you before they even ransom you. And there's expectations that at some point they will drop the whole encryption thing and just go for the exfil.
Yeah.
Just going for the really, really crunchy bits that you don't want to have in public and just get money from you for not publishing it.
Yeah. I'm not, you don't want to pay to unencrypt your data? Cool. I'm going to post it and everyone's going to know your customer list. Are you sure you don't want to pay?
But and it's hurdles all the way down though, because Carl, your company makes healthcare software, and if they attacked you, they could try to ransom you. And if they can't get money, or even if they do, they could go to the healthcare companies that use your software and say, hey, we've got your data. And regardless of whether it works there or not, they could come to me and say, hey, I've got your data. Once they've got that data, they've got all sorts of people they could hang that over their head and potentially make money. And then, of course, they're probably still going to sell it to somebody else on the back end. So, just getting to the data, once they touch the data, there's so many things that they can do that don't have to be ransomware.
Yeah. Once they're in your system, okay, you've paid them off, they've unencrypted it, but how do you know that your data is sound without being able to do some forensics of your own to verify that nothing's changed? This is especially important now that research environments are getting hit more frequently.
Yeah, or SolarWinds is a perfect example there too.
University of Michigan was hit a couple of years ago, and their systems were offline for 2 years because of the investigation. That's 2 years of a research grant wasted.
It's a hell of a denial of service attack.
Well, and the thing you mentioned about the customer service element, which just blows my mind to say, but if I pay you and get my data back, then okay, fine, I can correlate those things. There's nothing that an attacker can do to convince me, if they're threatening to release my data, that even if I pay them, they're not going to do it. How do I know they're not going to do it? How do I know they're not shopping the data? Usually one's competitors are smart enough to not touch that with a 10-foot pole, but there's nothing I can stop you from releasing that data.
Worse yet, what if I sell it on the dark web?
Well, it's
I promised you that I wouldn't release it for free, but by God, I'm going to charge other shady people for
Exactly.
it.
it's classic extortion. It's yeah. You can say what makes me think that if I pay you, you're not going to do this anyway. And
I promise to do it if you don't.
what choice do you have?